What is going on, everybody, and welcome back to your show. It is the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast, alongside my esteemed co-host, Mr. Steele Roden, your boy, Big Flip Livingstone, holding it down. We have a lot to get to on today's episode, people. Injuries, emerging fantasy trends, Steele's on fire with the bets. Let's get right to it.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You heard the music, and you know what time it is. It is time for the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast, Tuesday edition. Thank you so much, everyone, for making us your first listen every single day. We see and appreciate you, and we are available and free across all platforms you find your favorite and hottest content. And that, of course, includes YouTube. So continue to smash that subscribe button. We see you, and again, you know we appreciate you, which is why we are going to continue to feed you with this fire fantasy content. Bets, that's coming up at the end of the show. We're going to take a look at some emerging fantasy trends today, Seal. Some of the things that you and I have seen. Now we are officially past the 1 month mark. There are some things we have to take a look at. Some good, some bad, all relevant on the fantasy front. Starting with these injuries, Steele. Before we get to the trends, before we get to the bets, we always have to keep our fans, our listeners updated with these injuries because these are big name players. Patrik Laine goes down with another injury, Steele. Let's start there. Yeah, he's been off to a slow start. 4 points in 8 games, but you know he was going to pick it up at some point. And now another injury throws a wrinkle in this player's, overall outcome this season. I want to hear what you have to say. 3 or 4 weeks with the sprained ankle. What does it mean for Boone Jenner and Johnny Gaudreau? And what does it mean for Patrik Laine's GM owners out there who are now going to have to deal with another month of this guy on the shelf?
Yeah, well, I think we've already seen it affect both Boone Jenner and Johnny Gaudreau, especially with the injury at the first game of the season when he injured his elbow. There wasn't enough time for those players to really find chemistry and find that, connection between one another. And then they started to get it going back, they started to get it going again when Laine came back from that injury. It wasn't great, but, they were starting to click. Things were kind of falling into place a little bit better than what we saw. And once again, Patrik Laine goes down out for another 3 to 4 weeks, which is just going to continue to hurt Johnny Gaudreau, Boone Jenner's production offensively. And also you bring into the fact that Zach Werenski is out for the entire season now. Like, this really just seems like a complete off season, just off season for the Columbus Blue Jackets. Like, they're not going anywhere. And what I've really been thinking about over the last, few days, last day and a half, is what is going through the mind of Johnny Gaudreau right now? Like, he's probably thinking to himself, did I make the right decision to come here? He obviously wants to play and, be a Stanley Cup contender, but you're not going to get that with the Columbus Blue Jackets right off the bat. And especially with these injuries, it's going to be a very hard season for Johnny Gaudreau, Patrik Laine, Boone Jenner, and any fantasy GM who owns those players.
Hey, looking at this, just at the injuries, number one, before I mention my take on Gaudreau, Boqvist out, Voracek out, Kuraly out, Werenski out, Goodbranson out. They've had injuries to the goaltending. They've had struggles scoring. Some of these players that they expected to, have another good year, Cole Sillinger has been invisible. Yes, Gaudreau has been putting up some points. He hasn't really been as good as you'd expect him to be. This Laine injury, Steele, when this player has been healthy, Laine is an effective goal scorer and a point producer. 178 goals, 153 assists for 331 points in his career over the course of 400 plus games. I really do feel he'd be much closer to a point per game player if he was able to stay in the lineup a little bit more, because really that's the only knock on him, because then he goes streaky. He's hot and cold, especially after these injuries. Going to be really tough for him to come back because, let's say he is back in a month. Then you have some break for the Christmas time, for the Christmas season. It's a tough time to get going during the holidays. So I would be very wary of what you do with Patrik Laine. Do I want to give up on him yet? No, stash him in the IR if you can. that's the move to make. But the other thing I wanted to mention here before we move on, the right side in Columbus is very weak. I don't even know what they're going to do to replace Patrik Laine. They're going to have to get creative. I don't know if Gustav Nyquist switches around because I know he can play a bit of both wings. Let's see what shakes down in Columbus, because for now, Steele, it's absolutely nothing good. Not a lot of depth on that team. Speaking of which, Thomas Chabot going down for the Ottawa Senators. Now all of a sudden, they cut Nikita Zaitsev a couple of weeks ago. Artem Zub is still hurt. This blue line is very, very shallow. Bernard Darker going to get a little look. I don't know what you want to go here with this, Steele, but the Ottawa Senators are in trouble. Thomas Chabot, obviously, they're clear cut, far and away, number one. Out for at 1 week. A concussion, though? This is a little bit more concerning. The Ottawa Senators are in trouble.
Yeah, and 1 week minimum for this concussion as well for Thomas Chabot.
Yeah.
So it could be a few, maybe another week on top of that, just to be safe and certain that he's recovered, especially dealing with the head injury. But it's a tough loss for GMs out there who drafted a guy like Thomas Chabot, because especially when you're on a week-to-week matchup or even just points league, it's a big loss for your fantasy team. And this is another team in the NHL that has really struggled because of these injuries that they've dealt with, like losing Josh Norris for this extended period of time. Like, they said that he might be out indefinitely. They'll reevaluate him back in February when it gets to February, March time, but he could be done for the rest of the year. And
their season could be done by then as well.
Yeah, their season could be done. And I know we're talking about Thomas Chabot being only out for a week minimum, but we heard Pierre Dorion and the head coaching staff say that this next stretch of games is really important. Like, we cannot continue to lose after just going on that 6-game losing streak. So it's really important for this team to really come together and find a spark somehow. They get Cam Talbot back, so he's looked pretty decent in the crease so far, especially their last game, 4-1 win against the Flyers. But it's definitely going to be a struggle, and it's going to be a tough loss for managers out there for this next week, maybe 2 weeks.
And just in terms of the concussion itself, that is never an injury you want any player to deal with. Others are much more clear cut with the recovery time. The brain recovering is something, I am not a doctor. I'm not even close, but we've watched enough hockey and seen enough players go down with an injury, and 1 week turns into a month. I'm not saying that's the case with Chabot. You just hope he's back in a hurry, because also a quick look at this Atlantic Division. 11 points in dead last 8th spot, 3 points adrift from the next team in the Buffalo Sabres.
Yeah.
And these key players are starting to drop. Ottawa Senators fans better buckle up, because it was supposed to be that dream, one of the dream seasons. Great off season, still lots of time. Not ready to count them out yet, Steele, but that Atlantic Division is getting tight. Very quickly before we get to break, the return of Matt Murray to the Toronto Maple Leafs lineup is something that you're going to have to keep your eye on if you are a fantasy GM, because just by de facto, just by him being in the cage right now with Samsonov out, he is going to get run out there for a majority of the games, at least over this next week or two. He is only rostered in 46% of ESPN leagues. I know I'm going to be taking a shot on Matt Murray. We know that the Leafs have had their struggles. We'll talk about that at Big Time Bets coming up at the end of the show, because what I saw from the Toronto Maple Leafs on Saturday night, a big gutsy comeback win. I know it was the Vancouver Canucks. I think we're in for a little bit of a come up here from the Toronto Maple Leafs, just in time to get a goalie back. Have a look at Matt Murray. I don't know what you think about those takes, Steele.
Yeah, I really did expect him to get back into the lineup over this past weekend. Shalgren got his first NHL career back-to-back starts against the Penguins and Vancouver Canucks. So that was a big deal for him as well, playing back-to-back games. And we talked about this last week, where Matt Murray was potentially returning soon, and because of the Samsonov injury, that it was probably worth taking a shot. Obviously, you got to take consideration the risk of injury and re-nagging an injury that we've seen Matt Murray do countless times. So definitely take a shot if if you've got some goalie problems already. I talked about it with guys like Demko, Binnington, those type of goalies. But on top of that, we also have another Atlantic player coming back into the lineup as well. Tyler Bertuzzi is back in action tonight against the Anaheim Ducks. He's a guy that I've had on my IR since the beginning of the season. I did not want to let him go. He's also out there owned between 50 and 60% in both Yahoo and ESPN leagues. So if he's available in your league, this is a guy that I really do suggest to keep your eye on or pick up almost immediately, because he does make a big impact for the Detroit Red Wings.
Yeah, and it will be interesting to see what he does for the overall quality of this team because as much as, we've seen some good and some bad from the Detroit Red Wings, Ville Husso's been pretty solid. I think bringing a guy in who plays with that sandpaper and grit that Tyler Bertuzzi does can be a lot more than just on the score sheet in terms of the value to this club. So I'm very intrigued to see what, I've been pumping the Detroit Red Wings tires, maybe a little bit too prematurely, but we're starting to get there and see they have a lot of very interesting young pieces on that team. And I'll leave that conversation at that.
Well, it was all Red Wings and Senators when we were talking in the offseason, and they're not really living up to the hype, Flip. So
definitely not the Ottawa Senators. The Detroit Red Wings have already looked better, but then they turn around and just blow a gasket. So we'll wait and see. Tyler Bertuzzi's return is huge. Your return on laying some loot on betonline.net could also be huge. Steele and I hit them up every day for our odds and lines. Make sure you check out our Twitter for all of our latest picks and odds, which we get at betonline.net. Your number one source for sports betting info, stats, analysis, and news. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there. From football to basketball to soccer and esports, the World Cup is coming up, people. Don't slip. They have it all covered for you at betonline.net. And if you love podcasts, you can find those on BetOnline as well. It is the fastest and easiest way to get all of your betting fix. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts.
Thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. For your next listen, though, please go check out Locked On Sports Today podcast. The biggest stories of the day, instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day. Available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Flip. Emerging trends right now.
Yes.
A bunch of teams heading in different directions. We've talked about all these teams. I know where you want to start with this. Probably the biggest surprise out of all teams in the NHL right now. I'll throw it over to you, but they've been absolutely incredible.
Look, almost every single first place team in every division is a surprise. Boston in the Atlantic in number one, surprise. Winnipeg tied for first in the Central, surprise. Vegas, maybe not so much, but the New Jersey Devils at 4 points ahead of the New York Islanders, Carolina Hurricanes, Rangers, and others is definitely, I know it's not so much as emerging, except of emerged now, because this is a 9-game heater for the Devils. We knew this team was going to be better. We knew the future was bright with the New Jersey Devils, but the future is now in New Jersey, and they are winning games at an impressive pace. Do I think they can keep this up? No, that's not realistic. We're not crazy here at the Fantasy Hockey Podcast. We like to get a little freaky and a little weird, but we're sticking to our guns on this because these pieces that you continue to see get it done. And what impresses me perhaps the most about this New Jersey Devils team, Steele, is they're getting a little love from everywhere. Yes, you have your Jesper Bratt awesome year. Yes, Nico Hischier and Jack Hughes. Dougie Hamilton's starting to get it done. Out of nowhere, also, I don't know if you mentioned it yesterday, Thomas Tatar, a great ad this week, getting looks on the top line. If you haven't done it yet, go get him. Miles Wood on a heater. Even guys like Ryan Graves and John Marino chipping in. When you have these teams getting all this love from all these lines, Steele. Oh, and Vitek Vanacek. Speaking of on a heater, have a look at him because this team impressing me, Steele, on all levels. And what also might impress me the most is you're not even starting to see much from the guys that we talked about in Dawson Mercer, Damon Severson. They're still getting, there's still other pieces out there that haven't started to get going. I'm intrigued to see how the rest of this season goes. But if you haven't jumped on the hot start from all of these pieces that we just mentioned, it's an emerging fantasy trend that you want to hop on.
Yeah, and for me, I think the biggest takeaway with the New Jersey Devils is we talked about this in the offseason is how good can they be when Hischier and Hughes are healthy and they're in the lineup. They haven't missed a game this season.
Thank you.
And they've been absolutely fantastic
Great
too.
point.
So we know what they're able to do when they're in the lineup for their team and share the love between everyone, especially some of their depth forwards up front as well. But yeah, they've been absolutely fantastic. Big surprise for me, but that's what those two studs can do when
Love
they're
that.
in the lineup.
Great
For me,
point.
the emerging trend here for me, I'm taking a look at the Colorado Avalanche power play, not just the power play, but the special teams in specific.
Thank you.
I'm looking at their power play, 39% efficient in the league right now, top of the league, top cream of the crop. And obviously, Cale Makar, Mikko Rantanen, Nathan McKinnon. But you've also got Evan Rodriguez down there, and he's only owned at 12% or 9% in both Yahoo and ESPN fantasy leagues. He's got 3 power play goals. He's on the first power play unit with them. So that's a guy that I would take into consideration, especially for special team points or power play points, but also just in general. Logan O'Connor has looked pretty good for the Avalanche as well. He's got 5 goals, 6 points on the season, 1 shorthanded goal, 2 shorthanded points overall. He's been moved up and down the lineup between the second line and third line. He's looked really great. So I like a couple of those depth players for the Avalanche.
I like that you're highlighting special teams, especially because I was about to do the same with another West Coast team, if you don't mind me continuing on this special teams thread. You know me when it comes, I'm a bit of a John Tortorella when it comes to analytics. I appreciate them, I read them, but for me, it's about the eye test and watching for the most part. I do appreciate a good stat. So let me throw out this about the Dallas Stars, who I had to peg and give some love as an emerging team that is getting it done on both the power play and penalty kill. Special teams for the Stars, also just overall, their offense has been sensational this year. They are sitting in third in the league with 56 goals scored, behind only the Oilers and your Avalanche. And the stat I wanted to throw at you, special teams goals for percentage, which is power play plus penalty kill goals for, second in the league at 65%, behind only the number 1 team in the league in the Boston Bruins, who have been on a tear. So they are right there as getting it done on the power play and penalty kill. I had to throw that stat out there. And the last thing I wanted to say is an emerging trend from this team, and I saw it, you mentioned it in the offseason. I need to eat some hat and some crow for talking ish about Joe Pavelski. I'm going to wear it because he's been solid again. 8 goals, 9 assists, 17 assists, playing well with Rupe Hintz and Jason Robertson. But you also pegged a couple of bounce-back targets in Jamie Benn and Tyler Seguin. How about 6 goals, 8 assists for Jamie Benn? Not bad.
He's looked
3
good
goals,
recently.
8 assists, Tyler Seguin. Take a look at these Dallas Stars, because I actually tend to believe that some of these pieces that are also starting to, Mason Marchment was hot, now cooled. You got to be taking a look at this Dallas Stars team, because the most impressive thing, Steele, in the cage, Scott Wedgwood steps in for a red-hot Jake Ottinger and continues to play well. I wouldn't sleep on this Dallas Stars team come playoff time. A very pesky team. They get it done without John Klingberg this year. Very impressive stuff and an emerging trend on my notepad, Steele.
And I think they've got, to me, one of the top 7 tandems in net right now. Jake Ottinger, Scott Wedgwood looked great when he was, taking over the crease while Ottinger was recovering from his injury. So good points there, Flip. I was going to bring up Joe Pavelski, the 38-year-old, but thank you for... Yeah, I know. I was going to bring it up. We pump
tires and we talk a lot of smack, but I will take it on the chin when I'm wrong. And I was wrong about Joel Pavelski in a big, bad way, because, hats off to him at, 38, 39? Still getting it done.
39. Yeah.
He's not Mark Giordano territory, but he's getting close.
Not that old yet, but he's getting there. And for me, another emerging trend so far this year, in the opposite direction of what we just talked about, though, the Buffalo Sabres, man. The Buffalo Sabres. I told everyone this at the end of October, beginning of November, that they're not good in the second month of the season. They're absolutely terrible. They're on a 5-game losing streak right now. They've lost by 2 or more goals in those 5 games. They've been absolutely dominated so far. When I did the buy low, sell high segment, Rasmus Dahlin was one of those players to sell high on.
Smart.
Going into the month of November, he started off hot. We know the Sabres started off hot, but it was bound to fall apart. I'm not saying that they can't get back on track, but for some reason in the second month of the season, it just starts to crumble right in front of them.
Hey, you called it. You were spot on with it. I live down here in the South Niagara region. I listen to the Buffalo radio, sports radio on the regular when I'm in the car. There is a lot to like about this team fantasy-wise.
There is.
We talked about it. There's a lot to like about them fantasy-wise. But if you are running Craig Anderson and Eric Comrie out there, and I understand that hasn't been the only issue, there is just something to be said about the overall quality of your club, and you're not going anywhere in a division that holds the teams that the Atlantic have or any other division. So that it is right there with the Buffalo Sabres. I hear you, and they've been just downright awful. I feel like this is the team that they're either going to look good, really good or great, or they're going to just be completely awful, broken down trash, no in between. I'm getting a bit heated. I have one more trend I'm going to pop off right after the break before our big time bets because it might be my most important one that I'm highlighting, Steele, if that's all right with you.
Yeah, of course. We got to keep the ball rolling with these emerging trends. But thank you so much out there for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Please hit the subscribe, hit the follow button. We appreciate all the love and support out there. And Flip, take it away.
Thank you, sir. Last trend that I wanted to highlight, and again, we've said it at length. You have to keep your finger on the pulse when it comes to the goaltending market in this league. If you miss an opportunity to pounce on a guy who's getting more playing time or an injury or a hot streak, Matt Murray or otherwise, my trend is these goaltending situations are in flux across the NHL in a number of major markets. Toronto, Florida with Spencer Knight getting more time. Seattle with Martin Jones taking the crease, obviously with injury. Vitek Vanacek in New Jersey now being the guy. How about Pyotr Kochetkov? I know I'm butchering his first name, but Pyotr Kochetkov is now stepping in and looking good. If you had a look at Rob Brindamore's quotes after the game the other night and he won, they like this goalie a lot in Carolina. I know it's Freddie Anderson's crease. I'm not getting carried away here, but there are some situations in flux. Dallas, Scott Wedgwood stepping in. Vegas, Aiden Hill and Logan Thompson now taking the crease. You have to keep your eye on these situations that one day could be one thing and the next day something completely different. So that was my last trend, Steele, because there are a number. Matt Murray is, point number one. This influx crease in Toronto, there's already been 3 goalies. There was almost a 4th. Let's just keep your eye on the goaltending situation because if you can pounce on a good goalie situation now, you'll be thanking me come January and February when even more injuries roll through.
Yeah, you always have to be keeping an eye on the waiver wire, especially when the goalie becomes available. I even talked about this to you a couple of days ago if I should pick up Jack Campbell because someone dropped him, but stay away from that because I already have some goalie trouble, so don't want to continue to add on to that. But let's continue with the big time bets where the money is made. If you don't mind, I'd like to start us off with the first pick of the night. I'm going back to the team that just hit for me the other night. I did pick them a day early. I did say that they were going to hit the puck line. They got smoked by the Washington Capitals. They play the Capitals again, and they won 6-3. So I'm going back to the Lightning, minus 160 against the Dallas Stars. The Stars have been fantastic. You said all of those points right there. Bounce back players, Hintz, Pavelski, Robertson have been phenomenal. Ottinger, phenomenal. But the Tampa Bay Lightning are still one of the best teams in the league right now.
And getting better.
I haven't liked what I've seen from Vasilevsky, but he's been getting better slowly. I'm going to take this Lightning money line minus 160.
It was actually the first game that I looked at, Steele, because I wanted to sprinkle, and it still might make my card because 6-3-1 over the last 10 for the Tampa Bay Lightning. They're starting to play better. I'm wary of taking I couldn't come on here and talk up the Dallas Stars at length and then go ahead and bet against them. So that's just because of my Dallas Stars rant, but I like your pick. If you don't mind, I'm going to fire off my first pick. It is the Columbus Blue Jackets on the money line. And this might be a tough sell considering Werenski and Patrik Laine just went down. But let me talk this out for a sec. They just spanked the Philadelphia Flyers 3 games ago. That's number one. The Columbus Blue Jackets also, over their last 2 games, 1 win, 1 loss, have looked a lot better, believe it or not. If you dig into some of those numbers, they have been better, and it could have easily been 2 wins. And lastly, aside from the Philadelphia Flyers now going on a I think it's 3-game skid, how about they only have 2 wins away from home this season out of 7 games? And out of the last 18 games against the Columbus Blue Jackets, and I understand these are different teams over those last couple of seasons, only 3 wins out of those 18 games against the Columbus Blue Jackets for the Philadelphia Flyers. They have trouble playing against Columbus. That's just a fact. On the money line at minus 103 as well, Steele, getting good odds. I know it's bold, but I'm feeling this spot for the Columbus Blue Jackets. That's my first pick of the night.
It's very bold, and we're going to have to do a side bet there because
Uh-oh.
I don't have trust in the Columbus Blue Jackets right
Done.
now. They have too many injuries. The goalies have been very inconsistent. I don't think they take the money line. So side bet, flip, side bet
Done.
for sure. I'm going to, if you don't mind, I'm going to say my next 2 picks with my lock of the night. I'm going with the Detroit Red Wings on the road, the return of Tyler Bertuzzi, minus 110 against the Anaheim Ducks.
Yeah.
2 teams that have been very inconsistent in the goals besides Billy Husso. Like, he plays one good game and then, lets 6 in the next. So, 2 inconsistent teams with goalies in the crease, but I'm taking the Red Wings at minus 110 on the money line. And then this might be the perfect opportunity to put some money on the Vancouver Canucks.
Ooh.
Plus 110 on the road against the Buffalo Sabres. The Sabres on a 5-game losing streak. They don't play good in the month of November. So I'm going with the Canucks. It might be a long shot. Plus 110. Odds are great. That's my lock of the night.
Don't hate either of those picks, Steele. I did butcher completely the Philadelphia Flyers road record by reading the Washington Capitals road record of 2-5-1. Flyers haven't been as bad, 3-3-1. Still feeling the Columbus Blue Jackets in this spot, and that's okay that you're not feeling it because I'm going to take the heat on that one. Good spot regardless. Moving on. My second pick. I mentioned a little preamble about the Toronto Maple Leafs. I'm wearing the Leafs hoodie. I'm drinking the Kool-Aid. That was a big come-from-behind win on a very emotionally charged night for the Toronto Maple Leafs with Boria Salming and the other Hall of Famers in the building for Hall of Fame night. This might be a tough spot for them on the road against the Pittsburgh Penguins. They are 4-6 in their last 10 against the Pens. But I think the Leafs show some of their character here, and you're going to get a big night from Austin Matthews, John Tavares, and the other big pieces up front. The Pittsburgh Penguins have struggled this year, and I know that they're just coming off a victory against this very same team. I don't know, Steele. This one just feels like a spot that I want to take the Leafs. Minus 115. Give me the Leafs on the money line. And my favorite pick of the night, a player that I talked about a few times at the start of the year on the waiver wire in the first 2 weeks. And now look at him go, 6 goals in 5 games for Riley Smith. Riley Smith, anytime point. Yeah. How about in 28 career games for Riley Smith against the San Jose Sharks? 10 goals, 16 assists for 26 points. He likes playing against the Sharks. The Sharks are not a good team. Vegas on a heater. I'm heated up. Give me Riley Smith anytime point because I think he's going to be all over the goal sheet. I can't tell if it's goals or assists. Copping out with the anytime point. I will tweet out the odds later because they are not up yet.
Could be a shorthanded goal because he's been absolutely phenomenal on when they're shorthanded. So him and William Karlsson, great on the special teams, on the PK. Thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Once again, please check out Locked On Sports Today podcast. Big game reactions, game recaps, and the take of the day available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you so much for tuning in for today's episode with Flip and I. Have a great day. Good luck with all your bets out there. And we shall see you back here again tomorrow.
Peace.